Hello, welcome. Um, this is the last session of the day, and let's wrap it up with building smarter product decisions, how AI can power analytics and strategy. With us today is Siddharth Arora, product manager at Yelp, and he'll walk us through this process.
Thank you so much. Give me 1 second so I can just set myself up. I will present.
Sure, no problem.
Can you see my screen?
Yeah, looks like we can.
Okay, perfect. All right. Thank you so much for setting this up. A quick introduction about what I do, and then I'll just jump right in. So I'm currently managing AI products at Yelp and have been here for about 6 years. Total experience around 15 years, most of it in product management. And the last 2 years have been a great shift for me in terms of how I've been doing traditional product management and now how AI kind of changes that. So today I'm going to focus a lot on how AI sort of impacts what we do as product managers. Okay, quickly, I'm going to cover very high level what's changing in product management, especially with the advent of all of the AI tools. And then I have practical examples of what that change practically means for me on a day-to-day basis, how I use AI, and what part of my job is it sort of making simpler and making better and things like that. And then I'll end with some real world case stories, which is, how other companies are doing the same thing. And then hopefully we have some time for Q&A. With that said, if anybody has questions during I'm going through the slides, just feel free to raise your hand. I'm gonna pause and take questions. Okay. At a very, very high level, I think there are three things that AI is doing very well, and at least in my perspective. One is it is replacing a lot of the slower processes which need a lot of manual work with instant sort of discovery of insights or discovery of things that either would be very difficult to spot as a human or as a team of people, or it would just take a lot of time. So instead of having, a team of 10 people going through thousands of customer support tickets, now what I can do is I can just take all of that raw feedback. I don't even need to structure it into JSON or a CSV, give it to an AI tool, and I start understanding what it says, what it means, maybe based on themes, prioritization, etc. Second aspect, which is very, very data focused, is that traditionally, most of the times when I look at, let's say, dashboards, I'm always looking at lagging metrics in the sense of I'm looking at data and trying to think what has happened. With AI, a lot of that is changing where instead of reactively looking at it, now you can proactively wait for AI to sort of spot these trends or anomalies very, very early on. And it also starts giving you hypotheses of why it might be, why things might be going up or down. And finally, I think, a large part of our job is communication, right? No matter what we are doing, we're trying to help people internally or externally sort of believe in our ideas or support our ideas or just sort of help in execution, creating strategies, talking to users. All of that takes a lot of time, right? So I can, from my personal experience, I know that writing every document or every email that is read by a critical audience takes me a lot of time. And I feel that is also a space where AI is really, really helping us and just making things a lot easier. Not only writing, but also sort of collating everything that I have that goes inside a document. Okay, on this slide, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to now translate that theory into something more practical, which is very, very relevant to product management as a function. So there are three critical areas where I've been using AI, and I feel it is unlocking or giving me a lot of leverage that I didn't have earlier. The first area is discovery. What is happening here is that a lot of the times when I do discovery basically just means, my intent or effort to understand what problems are my customers facing, which of those problems are bigger versus smaller, and which of them should I be solving. So that is how I think of discovery. Now, when I start thinking about my customers, usually, it's a very diverse set. Usually when they share feedback, it is coming across different channels. It could be coming on the app store through reviews. It could be coming through customer support tickets. It could be coming through other reviews, other interviews, etc. So just collating them, centralizing them in itself is a huge pain. And the bigger the product or the bigger the company, the more complex this entire ecosystem becomes. So that's part one, where despite being siloed and in independent systems, how can you use tools and processes to sort of get them together? Second aspect is once you've got them together, what do you do with it? And that's where you start thinking about, can I think about all of these issues in themes? Can I think about uncovering or discovering needs that I did not know about, or maybe I knew about them, but I did not know about the scale of it. Maybe I thought it was a small problem, but now, I have enough evidence to show that it was a large problem. It is a large problem. Second aspect is when you've done, discovery, hopefully you're at a stage where you have enough starting points, like these are the things I want to solve, or these are the bigger problems that my customers are facing. You can't solve all of them, right? Every product team, every tech organization is constrained by some amount of resources. That is where you start thinking, how do I prioritize? And in my mind, prioritization, and we will go deep into this, prioritization at a very high level can be simplistic, like effort versus impact, but on a realistic basis it's very, very complicated. Like, how do you calculate impact of things that have never been built before? How do you know how much time it will take to build this feature when we've never done something like that before? So that is where AI is able to sort of look at past context. It is able to look at external context. It is able to understand your specific need at the moment, at that moment, and then just help you understand objectively how you can think of impact and effort. The other thing which I will cover also through a real world scenario, real world case study, is that it can also help you build scenarios, right? So for example, if you have a roadmap, iteration A, iteration B, iteration C, it can help you create these scenarios of, if you were able to, build on A, this is what the world looks like. If you were to do B, this is what the world looks like. The third one is the product strategy and narrative. This, in my mind, is still a very, very tough problem to solve, even with AI. And the reason I say that is because this just needs so much context, and it needs, even within that context, a lot of the things are always moving and evolving and changing. So the goal here is, how can I zoom out and then start thinking of something more long term, either for my team or for my entire organization? And then how do I sort of build a common narrative that I believe in, but I'm also able to sort of convince and align all of my stakeholders to believe in. Okay, now I'm going to jump into how I would do discovery, prioritization, and building a strategy using AI. And to do that, I'm going to use an example. So this is, excuse me, this is just a hypothetical company called SwiftBite. They are a consumer delivery app. Anybody who using SwiftBite can order food, groceries, other essentials from nearby stores. And their value prop is they want to deliver everything within 30 minutes. So now, going back to the aspect of discovery, let's say that we are starting, in the case of SwiftBite, with trying to identify issues or customer pains that are being surfaced every day through customer support, right? Anytime you're using an app, especially when it requires some kind of real world interaction or delivery of goods, there are issues bound to happen, delay or things broken or things not reaching the right address and things like that. So in this case, what I've done is, I've just created this mock set of, let's say, 30 customer support tickets, and I'm going to show this Google Sheet so that we can quickly sort of run through what the sheet looks like. The assumption here is that this company Swift already has a chatbot, but it also has manual agents. And the chatbot is structured in a way where it tries to tackle some initial questions which are fairly easy. If they're more complicated, it goes to a human. So the goal of this sort of example is, how can we take this, try to use AI, and try to then end up in a situation where we've identified things that either would have taken a lot of time or maybe the human eye would have missed. So with that said, let me quickly switch to this tab. And let me zoom in a little bit. Okay, so let's just assume this is what the customer support ticket database looks like. Let's just focus on column F. Column F is a representation of what the user thought his or her problem was, and this is what they shared with the chatbot or the human inside the team. So let's say this person says the driver marked the order as delivered, but there is literally nothing at my doorstep. I checked my neighbors. Then this column G, what it does is it helps you understand how our system or a customer support representative acted on, like, what did they do? Do they agree with this complaint? Did they fix it, etc.? So this is, for example, this person said created escalation ticket for logistics team, which makes me feel that probably this is a genuine issue. Now, if you keep going through these tickets, you will see that they are a broad range of what is happening, right? So this is probably something around delivery. The one we read was, items not even being there. This is more about missing items. This is about refund payments, etc. Now, this is only 30 rows, but imagine a real world company. This could be, thousands, maybe even tens of thousands of rows. And then browsing through these is obviously going to be a pain. And structuring them and trying to identify themes will just take a lot of time. Not to forget that if humans are doing it, there might be a lot of subjectivity and there might be human errors. So what I did next was I created a prompt. This is just a snapshot of it. I'll show you the exact prompt as well. And in this prompt, my goal was, as stated in the previous slide, I want to structure everything I learned from my customers. And the prompt is structured in a way I tell it what input I will give you, what is the context you should use, and what is the output I expect, right? So let me go here. This is what the prompt looks like. You're analyzing customer support tickets for Swift Bite. It's a 30-minute food delivery grocery app. You will receive a raw CSV, export a support ticket. So here I'm helping it understand very, very concretely and clearly what is the starting point. Then what I'm asking it to do is I'm creating two separate tasks. One is I'm asking it to look at the CSV or this database that I share, probably add a column and help me understand what theme it should, like, is there a theme around these tickets? Can we just, start clubbing some of these rows together? I also say things like, merge similar issues into smaller number of natural higher level themes, because when I ran the first version of this prompt, I actually did not have this instruction. And what it did, it created a really long list of themes. And it just felt like, none of the themes were similar to each other. Whereas when I was reading the raw queries, it felt like they were more or less, very close to each other. So anyways, I think the point here is that as long as you are giving the right instructions to your AI tool, it'll help you get closer to where you want. The second part of the task is that once you're done with creating themes, can you then create a summary which sort of summarizes what me or my manager or the leadership wants to look at, right? Because nobody, I mean, I'm sure there's a team who sort of works at this level, but you want to keep this information, like, reducing the zoom level so you can keep sharing it with other senior leaders. So that's what happens in the second part of the task. And then I just, give it more examples of, when you share the summary, please help me understand the most important themes. I want to focus on user needs, pains, etc. This is something that, I have, like, these are my mental models of how, as a product manager, I want to analyze my customers' feedback and my customer interviews. This could be very easily modified or tweaked as per, your company, your team, you as a person, what you want to look at. So now, let's say I ran this prompt in the background, and then what it did is it actually came up and updated the same sheet with a column where it started identifying themes. So let me go back here. It identified 7 major themes, and while this looks fairly simple and quick, if you zoom in and if you were to do this manually, even these 30 rows would take you a long time to read through and then sort of mentally think of what categories I could think of. But for, if you're using AI in the right manner, this probably takes less than a minute, maybe, or a few seconds. So the other thing that I'll call out is, when I was writing this prompt, it didn't happen, like, I couldn't land the perfect prompt in the first time, which is fine, right? Like, in my mind, this is a one-time activity where I want to build something which is good enough that reduces at least 80 to 90% of the manual effort I would have put in here. So the guidance here is that never, when you start thinking of using AI to make your life easy or make better decisions, never think of this as creating a perfect scenario. Always think of making it something good enough, so that you can reduce the amount of time you put in, but still land at a situation which is higher in terms of quality. Um, and then, I just want to talk about, so this is, sorry, so this is the actual second part of the task. So the first part of the task is it created a Google Sheet with the themes, the CSV. Second is now it is summarizing everything it learned from that. So, it's giving me most important themes. Like if you ever want to prioritize, just focus on these three themes. It's also helping me understand the user needs and pains that came out. And the good part is that it is now being very objective, because there is no room for introducing subjectivity, because AI doesn't have an opinion. It'll just base everything on what it's reading. Two is there are no humans trying to interpret the every input that the user has given. So in my mind, like, this is an unbiased view of what my customers are feeling. Maybe I already know this, maybe I don't know this, so it just gives me a good validation of where I'm heading. And then I think the third aspect I like to always focus on is, like, whenever I look at data or think about my customers, there's always a question of so what? Like, what do I do about it? And that's where I like to think about the opportunity. So it gives me good hints around, maybe explore things like ET accuracy or fulfillment quality and things like that. So I'm going to summarize this section and then pause for a minute to see if there are any questions or thoughts. So overall, when I think of product discovery, in my mind, discovery is and always will be, despite AI being there, the most important part of building products. If you are unable to identify the right problem to solve, no matter how good or fancy or seamless your solution is, nobody is going to use it. But the problem with discovery always has been that all of the traditional methods, like user interviews or looking at data or just observing them in the real world scenario, it just takes a lot of time. And even if it takes time, it is just fragmented. The examples I shared above, like, could be app reviews, could be other feedback, things like that. So in my mind, the biggest leverage here is that instead of spending hours just doing some of the grunt work of creating data pipelines or migrating data from one source to the other, then sort of making it look similar, you can now use tools or just simple prompts like I did in this example. What this ensures and unlocks for me is that since it is taking me lesser time to do my discovery, I will be able to act on them much sooner. In the traditional world, there have been, like, in my real experience, there have been times where by the time we get to a stage where we have confidently identified that this is a problem that exists, either that problem stopped existing or it became a big escalation, or people started churning because competitor had solved that problem. So all in all, AI has now started helping me find the right insights at the right time by reducing a lot of my manual work, which is the second point where I've been experimenting on a personal level as well as in my organization. We've been experimenting with different tools that are available in the market, or different ways of just creating our own sort of AI driven chatbots that is able to query all of our databases, all of our documentation, etc. But the larger point is that everybody should try to figure out what tool process works for them, and then try to implement it in a way that it can ingest all of your sources of information, not only for customer support, but in general, be it strategy, be it roadmaps, etc. How can this tool sort of ingest everything so that it has a holistic view? Um, So while in this case, what I use was a simple GPT prompt that is also very similar to what we're using in our organization, where we have an internal version deployed, which is specifically talking to all of the different collateral. It is plugged into our wiki. It is plugged into Jira so that it can look at older tickets. It is plugged into a lot of documentation that I've written in the past. And every time I have a query or I want to do unlocking of insights, it has that context. It sort of ensures that it is answering my questions in that context. Finally, I think I'm going to be reiterating this aspect a little bit throughout the slide, is that um, even today, I don't blindly trust the output that an AI tool or a prompt like the above example produces. Um, and hence, at every step, especially when you're deploying these things fairly new or fairly early on, I always think of having human touch points where we validate to some extent if it is producing the output in an accurate manner. And if it is not, then I would again go back. I would identify either my prompt needs improvement, or maybe it did not have access to the context that I have access to, or maybe there are some databases that or dashboards that it needed to look at, which I have been looking at. So I would always think of, can I give it more context, and or can I improve the instruction slash the prompt? And again, to summarize, in my mind, I'm not using these processes to replace what I do. I am using this to reduce my manual work, which probably does not need a lot of my cognitive abilities, so that I have more time to put my mind to the larger, bigger problems. Okay, I'm going to pause here quickly, see if there are any questions, any thoughts that I can answer. Feel free to raise your hands or type in the chat. There are no questions in the Q&A yet. Okay, if no questions, I can keep going. All right, now let's come to the second part of the entire puzzle, which is basically, once we have what we've discovered, how do we know what to act on, right? And in my mind, I think this, like, I just want to double click on the subtitle of the slide, where discovery will show you the things that customers feel or they want or they need, but it still doesn't answer the question of, should we fix all of them? What should we fix first? What should we fix second? So the complexity here is that I would say that customer input or understanding of the customer is only one part of the puzzle, right? If you're working as a product manager, as an engineer, as a data scientist, as an analyst, you know that there are multiple other constraints that you have to think about when you're prioritizing, right? Be it technical debt, be it the bugs that your previous version has and you want to fix them, be it new strategic focus coming from your leaders, which now needs to sort of somehow feature into your roadmap, or like things like upgrading your platforms where you need migrations, etc. And then obviously the biggest constraint in my mind is always, how many people do you have to build the solution, because that will define what you can do in a certain amount of time. So the question still is, right, like, how do you prioritize? And while the answer is, in my mind, has always been very simple, like, prioritization should always be about the impact you can create for users and constrained by the effort you have. So the max ROI you can get across these two dimensions. But now if you look at this list, right, like tech debt, bugs, bets, platform migration, team bandwidth, the constraint and the impact of each of these will be very different, right? Tech debt might be, if we don't solve tech debt, we have a risk of losing data. So the impact here is, how do we, not lose data? There could be a specific bug which is more related to, let's say, sign up flow, and it could be directly impacting revenue. There could be a strategic bet that is focusing more on retention. So you see what's happening, like every item could have a different way of thinking of impact and effort, and hence the entire process is usually kind of messy and it gets subjective. So let's see how we can use AI, right? So again, sticking to the original example of SwiftBite. Again, this is just like a sample roadmap I created, 12 items. They're all tagged by the themes that AI helped me create in the previous section. But I don't know yet, what my priority should be. So column 2 is blank, and then what my impact and effort should be. So the third last and the second last columns are blank. So again, what I do is I create a prompt. Again, I'll go through the larger prompt in just a second, but here my goal is twofold. One is obviously to get a prioritized list, but I want to ensure that the prioritization happens in the right context, right? So what that means is, if, let's say, if a person who doesn't work at this company looks at this roadmap, I'm sure they will have some context of, comparing it to Uber Eats or Deliveroo or whatever, whatever delivery app they use, and they will start implying and applying a lot of their personal problems, and they might prioritize this list based on that. But that's not how it works, right? Like, as a product manager, I have a lot of internal context. So the second part of the prompt, which let me see if I can show on the screen now. So the second part of the prompt here, I focus a lot on giving it more context, right? So for example, I'll say use patterns learned by internal collateral, including customer pain points, needs, etc. Look at past PRDs, requirement documents, and understand how they have been evaluated. Look at dashboards to see actual data. Focus on things like, is the return rate or refund related issues, have they been a very large problem, things like that. So again, the purpose of this is that I want the prioritization, one, to happen in the right context. I want to make it as objective as possible. That is why I want to give it more evidence. And three, I also want it to be accurate, in the sense of, I don't want this to create a prioritization that doesn't make sense. So I also have somewhere here, um, I ask it to give me an impact rationale, and I will show you that in the real sheet in just a second, where what I mean to do is that if it is prioritizing one of my roadmap items as high, medium, low, I want to know why it is high or why it is medium or why it is low. And the reason I want to do this is I just want to validate that it's thinking the right direction. And if it's not, then I'm going to go back, either change my prompt or give it access to more documents. And again, so there are two tasks for this prompt. One is it'll add all of the missing columns, which I'll go to in just a second, and then it'll also produce a short summary for me. So now let me go back to the sheet. So this is what my input sheet look like. So priority column is blank, impact effort is blank, and this is what my output sheet looks like. So now it's ranked all of these items. I'm going to go to column J and probably just read why it thinks it is ranking it as a P0. So it says 31% of last month's support tickets reference to delays or inaccurate ETAs. Improving ETA accuracy directly strengthens the 30-minute promise. So now it's probably getting this from some of the strategy doc, where our branding or branding of this company is focused on the 30-minute promise. So it's also sort of helping me tie back that if you fix this, you're getting closer to the promise. The one thing it also did is it left this column blank, row number 9, column B. And the reason it did that is, again, let's read what it says. So preparation delays and cancellations happen regularly with long tail restaurants. However, because partner level data is incomplete, impact estimates are based on partial signals. So what it's telling me is that it doesn't have enough data, enough evidence to concretely call this as a P0, P1, P2, which I think is a really good outcome, right? I would prefer having a cell that is blank and understanding why it is blank, rather than it already assigning it a P0, P1, and then me figuring out later that maybe this is enough. So again, just to sort of summarize where we're at, right? We started with raw feedback from customers, identified themes. We created a roadmap, which is based on that, but also on a lot of internal other factors. We used AI to help us prioritize. We used the same prompt to also help us understand why and how it is prioritizing. And if the system is built in the right manner, maybe I build some feedback mechanism here and I say, hey, you know what? When you prioritize column row number 2, spot on, like this is a 10 on 10. But when you did it for row number 6, it was a 5 on 10. Right. So um, the reason I would want to do that is because with every iteration, I want these results to be better and to be in line with how we would have, like we as a team or me as a PM would have done it. And eventually, I want to get to a stage where I don't even look at these columns anymore, or I just remove this column, because now the system responds exactly to what we need and how we need it. Okay, I think, okay, so I think I don't have the second part of this output, which is the summary of the roadmap. But again, I want to now, summarize a couple of things on this slide. I think the first one we've already spoken about. Even from a prioritization perspective, this system or any system like it would reduce a lot of work because it helps me get holistic context very, very quickly. If I were to, start reading every past requirement document, every past dashboard, every OKR document, it just takes a lot of time. And being a human, you can't retain all of that context for a very long period of time. But I think in my mind, the second aspect is where I want to double click on. And, in all candor, I also know that I'm not there yet. So yes, my goal is to reduce the time I put in there, but it is also to improve the quality of the decisions I'm making, because that will be the real unlock. If I, for example, if I save time, but my decisions are still the same, yes, that is still some leverage. But the moment I start thinking or unlocking things that I couldn't have thought in the traditional world, that I feel is is at least in my mind is the stage I want to get to. So currently, the advantages I feel that help me make better decisions with a setup like this is that, all of the examples we looked at, there was no human bias or human interpretation, right? So I am now looking at every rationale very, very objectively, because it is pointing me back to, 30% drop. This relates to your strategy doc. Here is your strategy doc. You can go and read it. It also ensures that, historical context, and you can decide how back you want to go in time, is taken into consideration when you're thinking of the present and the future. At a human level, in my mind, I'm doing that, but practically speaking, I don't know. I don't remember if, what happened 1 year ago when we had this major outage or major bug, and how we fixed it and how I should use those learnings in my upcoming roadmap. But with this, it just becomes easy, right? It is probably going to read my retrospective document. It'll identify what the impact of the bug was, what the fix was, and then it'll sort of bring that context. As a result of the above two, what happens is that now the trade-offs start becoming a little more easier because they're evidence-driven. They're lesser objective and people-driven and more evidence-driven. So even I would say the dilemma or the debate of am I making the right decision is now a lot easier. It's still not at a stage where I'm 100% going in and saying, yes, this is what it is, but it's a lot better because I can read the objective evidence. Again, ending the slide with the same sort of disclaimer that while it can prevent biases, it can be objective, it can also misjudge a lot of things. Maybe there was a specific case in the past where, for whatever reason, right, like maybe we didn't have a large enough team, or maybe there were other priorities, a specific task took very long, or took less time, and it can over index on that task because that task is very similar to the one in my roadmap. And then hence there can be a misjudgment or missing context, which doesn't live in documents or doesn't live in any databases, etc. Similarly, second point, it can overweigh themes. For example, if a lot of the customer complaints are about payment related issues or funds not being on time, it can keep overweighing them without sort of um, trying to understand that is it a real issue, or is it something that people are just frustrated about because they didn't get the discount that they were promised and things like that. So all in all, the way I'm using the system, I think, I kind of highlighted when I showed the last two columns, is that I'm always trying to validate the assumptions that, the AI tools are using. And if they are validated, then I'm going to double down. If they are invalidated, then I'm going to try to fix the system somehow so that it acts a little better. Okay, again, I'm going to pause here, see how people are doing. Any questions, thoughts I can answer before we move on to the last section? Any questions at all? There is nothing in the chat. I'll just double check. Okay, cool. I'll keep going. All right, so this is the last segment in this kind of setup. And the reason I call it last is because, when I think about the real world, I want to start tactical, which is, looking at real user problems, real data, etc. But I also want to get to a stage where, I zoom out and start creating a longer term picture for myself, for my team, for my organization. Because yes, I want to tackle the problems of now, but I also want to build a vision or a strategy that is setting me apart with my competition and helping me meet my revenue goals or my user acquisition goals and things like that. Before I actually jump into the example or let's say the prompts here, I also want to double down on a couple of things. Like, at least in my mind, building strategy or building a longer term narrative is always very, very tough because there is way too many moving parts. And now with the advent of AI and the speed with which it is moving and evolving, I think things are even tougher. Like, it is close to impossible for me to stay on top of what's happening in the industry and what aspect of it is relevant to me, and can I start implementing this, can I start experimenting. So here are a couple of things which traditionally and even today have made strategy difficult. The is market is shifting too fast, which basically means what worked last year in my strategy might not work this year. So a lot of the playbooks, a lot of the wins and the losses might not be applicable next year. I think I touched on this a little bit. Too many signals to track, not only externally, like how the industry and the world is changing, but also how customers are changing. What I have seen is that now, since customers are also exposed to AI, their expectations and their pain points and their needs are evolving. And they're also evolving at the same speed as the industry. So how do you keep track of that? Internal data is always scattered, right? And I think more than internal data being scattered, it is also stored in a lot of people's minds. Like, people who've been in organizations, in teams for a very long period of time, they usually have very, very meaningful context. Some of that could be documented, but not all of it. And that also makes it just so difficult to, get everything on the same page and then sort of work across these varying narratives. Alignment is slow and subjective. The second last point, which basically means that even if in my mind I have a clear picture of this is what I want to do in 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, if I'm working in a tiered technical tech organization, there will be hierarchy, there will be multiple teams who I am dependent on and vice versa. And a very high chance that I will need support from most of these teams to make my roadmap and my strategy a success. So I need to align with them. And since they are this universe of people is so diverse in the sense of what they do, what they want to do, what they want to achieve at the end of the year, it just takes a lot of time. So now I'm going to try to um, paint a map, a diagram that in my mind helps me create the perfect strategy for the year, or whatever cadence you create strategy for. Um, we usually do a 1 year and a 3 year kind of a strategy. So in my mind, there are, I would say, three different boxes which I'll quickly go through. The first is, what is happening internally and what context can I get from, my discovery, my existing roadmap, bugs, past issues, past successes, etc. Like, everything that has happened in my close vicinity, in my team, between me, my engineering team, my design team, my data team, and so on. Second aspect is going beyond this universe of people who are very close to me. How do I talk to the sales teams to understand what they're learning from the customers? How do I talk to the customer support team and understand what they're learning from customers? How do I work with other product engineering data teams who I could be dependent on, and vice versa? And how does that create any constraint for me, which I should be thinking when I'm creating my strategy for the next year? Third one is purely external, which basically means, what are my competitors doing? Is the pricing, the average standard pricing in the world changing? How are, given that AI is so new, there are a lot of benchmarks that are being created, like what should be the latency, what should be the quality, what should be the accuracy of the responses. So ensuring that I'm able to ask the right questions and then also able to get those answers, and then finally sort of, build that into my strategy. And then how I think about, the best way, or not the best way, but I think the most useful way that I can comprehend right now is to imagine or think of AI becoming this sort of horizontal layer across how many ever buckets you have, right? Other teams, other people might do strategy differently. They might have more or less buckets, more complicated, simpler, whatever. But in my mind, if you start thinking of this horizontal layer, the reason I call it horizontal is twofold. One is that this layer will have some impact on each of these buckets independently, which is what we saw. Like I could use tools to do discovery, then to do road mapping, then to build a strategy. And it could also help bringing everything together. So I could, in the third bucket, I could also use prompts to, create like a, I don't know, in-depth industry review for which is based on my competitors and everything that I do. So give it context of what we do and then and then ask it to get everything from, the internet to help us understand what's happening. So it works independently in all of the boxes. And then it also, if you want, it also gets everything together. So that is how I think of the horizontal layer. So again, sticking with the same example, this is the third prompt, which is more around not necessarily creating a strategy, because I feel that is something that still needs, at least in my mind, it still needs a lot of human intervention. It needs a lot of human judgment, because these decisions are very, very critical. They will impact what you do today and in the next, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, not you, but everybody around you. So the way I use this prompt, and I'm going to go back to the sheet so that we can see this in detail, is that I want to give it access to as many things supporting documentation, evidence from the past that it can use to answer or surface the most important things that I should think about while I'm creating strategy, right? So this is just a hypothetical list. For example, look at all the discovery outputs, previous roadmaps, OKR review decks, quality dashboards, partner reports, and things like that. And again, this will be very specific to your company, your context. Maybe you don't even have this context, right? Maybe you're a startup or a smaller product where you don't have all of these things, and your discovery and planning and road mapping has not been as structured, which is completely fine. In that case, you can probably ask it to look at best practices from your industry and then use that context. Then I think I give it one task, which is more around, can you produce like a concise exec ready summary? And the goal here is to surface those aspects that become the most important input into my strategy, right? Again, now I'm going to go back to the output of this prompt. So this is what it looks like. But this is also, I would say, this is where everybody needs to put in a lot of thought, both from how you as a professional think about, your long-term narrative and how your organization does it. The reason I say that is this is how I think about it, right? Like I always want to know at a very, very high level, like what are the 2 or 3 themes or areas that I should focus on throughout the year. Ideally, I think what I should have also done is ask this prompt to give me some rationale behind why it is picking these 3 or 4 as the top. And then it should have like a one-line summary of we've seen too many issues and competition is ramping up and things like that. So that's point one. Point two is, like here, when I was writing this prompt, my main goal was that since I am I have been in this organization for so long, I have a very, very I would not biased, but a very set way of looking at things, which is influenced by how my team works, how my org works, how I am as a person. That set way of working could limit what I see, and I could miss certain aspects that in my traditional world I wouldn't have considered. So here I'm just asking you to help me find either get blind spots that has we missed in the roadmap, we missed in discovery, or just bring up those things that maybe we've looked at, but we ignored it earlier because we didn't have evidence or conviction that this is an area to focus on. Third one, I think this is the area where I feel the most value can be had, because from my experience, a lot of these LLMs and the deep research mode of these LLMs is doing a really good job in uncovering relevant insights to whatever analysis you're doing. So, just some examples here, like your competitors are racing on speed, not reliability. That makes me think that, should we also focus on speed? Are they seeing any trends in their customers that we've missed? Um, Things like that. So just to summarize here, right? Like I think the real leverage is one, AI can holistically comprehend everything that's happened in the past. So it has a very strong sense of the context you, your team, your organization has, as long as it is documented somewhere. Second, it can do all of these tasks in parallel and then sort of get them together and help you structure things with a very, very logical rationale and with enough evidence. And third, I think again, the same advice which I think maybe I don't have it on the slide. The third aspect is once you start getting the output and you start really using it to build strategies, you're automatically thinking, how can I make this entire process better the next time? And since most of the tools that exist today, or even if you're using just LLMs or like Chat GPT, etc., they're very easy to iterate on. So yeah, I think that's how I'm going to summarize this entire aspect, where it is important to holistically look at things, both internal and external, help you identify aspects which either just take time or you would miss. And then third is always focus on how do you make it better so that the next time the output is even higher quality. Okay, before I go on to case studies, pausing again, seeing if there are any questions, thoughts I can answer. No? Okay, cool. So what I'm going to do over the next two slides is I was just trying to find real world companies where some of the above have been implemented and how it is implemented, like not necessarily the behind the scenes of the how, but like what is it unlocking for them and then what is the impact it's creating. So the first one is Atlassian, which I'm hoping some or most of you would have used in some capacity, either through Wiki or Confluence or Jira and things like that. So they recently launched something they call as robo agents, which are basically AI-based agents that not only consume data but also take certain actions based on whatever the data says. And they're actually stating that this is saving approximately 40 minutes on an average per day for product managers or other users who are using these agents. And as far as I know, they've also now started. So this case study is based on internal usage of this. So Atlassian employees using robo agents, but as far as I know now, robo agents are also part of their offering to their paid customers. So I'm going to focus on one of the aspects that this does very well, which is discovery, and they call this bot or this agent as decision director. What you see on the right hand side. So on the left hand side of the picture, I'm guessing this is like a document where they've maybe a requirement document or something like that, and on the right is where you see a decision director. So what a decision director is doing in this case is it has they say a traffic light red, yellow, green scorecard for everything that you have, all of the decisions that you have in a doc. So you can see on the right, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but on the right, sorry, you can see these smaller dots that is helping everybody understand which decision is red, yellow, green, and things like that. At the bottom, I think it also gives structured feedback, and then it checks alignment with, a very commonly used framework like DASI. It also sort of clubs similar decisions across the organization. So there is, one, there is no duplication. Two, if there are things that, another team is doing and there could be some synergy where you could reduce the amount of effort that the two teams collaborate together, that could be a very good sort of outcome here. Um, and then I think the last one kind of also builds on top of that, where it also sort of helps you connect with other people who could help you build, who could help you execute these decisions across the organization. So I found this really interesting. I've linked the case study. I'm happy to share the deck with everyone. What this case study sort of unlocked for me is that based on simple, I wouldn't say simple, but based on straightforward logic, company context, and the right goal, they've been able to automate and increase the quality of the decision that the teams are making, right? So if you were to do what is happening on the right side of the screenshot, it would just take a lot of time. Maybe you create the same kind of quality, but identifying which other team is also thinking of a similar decision and how you can find the right people to help you with those actions usually takes a lot of time. So that was case study one. Case study two is by a company called ThoughtWorks. They have recently launched an experimental AI copilot. It is called Boba. And their primary use case for this is product strategy, which is what we were talking about earlier, and also ideation. I think that's one of the things that I didn't cover in my examples, where personally, an intermediate step that I also do is when I have the input from the customer, when I have the historical context, I also want to ideate. Like, my current roadmap has, let's say, 20 items, but I want to ideate and see if this 20 is enough. Are there another 20 that I'm not thinking about? So anyways, ideation is also like a really, really good use case of how you can implement in your, day to day. So in this case, what's happening here, I think this version of Boba does three things. It helps you identify research signals, that is the screenshot on the right, where you give it instructions of this is my industry, this is my competition, just help me understand, get the right signals that I can use for my strategy. The creative matrix, as far as I understood, is where you are using these signals plus other contexts, and now Boba or this copilot is creating ideas for you. Again, you could instruct it to be as creative as possible, or you could instruct it to be as conservative as possible, depending on how, what is the strategy of your organization, what is the direction of your organization. And the last one is scenario building, which I think we touched in one of the earlier slides, where it is basically then going to use these ideas and start thinking or building future looking scenarios so that you can kind of visualize that if you were to do this or if you were not to do this, what does the future of your product look like? So it just helps you, think about how you measure success, and it helps you get more confidence or lesser confidence in that success. Okay, that's pretty much all the slides I had for today. I know we have some time left. I'm more than happy to take as many questions that are on this or in general on the topic.
The chat can be used to ask questions if anyone wants to.
Okay, so I have a question from Artem. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Is there a way to work with discovery outside of existing stream of text feedback inputs? I mean, short answer is yes, but just to be sure I understand your question, is your question more around doing discovery beyond text, or is it more around, yeah, can you clarify, like, are you thinking about different modalities, like, I don't know, voice, or screen shares, like, recording or observing people, how they use your app, like things like that? Yes, I think your second point, like I would agree with that. Like usually if you're collecting text-based feedback from your customer, you would need an existing product. So are you thinking about this? Like, so in a new product, I would like, in my mind, I think you need to zoom out. Um, it doesn't matter if it is an inflowing stream or is it, like you're having one-on-one conversations on Google Meet or whatever, and you're recording your meetings, taking notes, that could happen. Second is, some kind of user research, user studies can happen if it's a completely new idea, if it's a new product. Third, you could also look at a lot of customers of your competitors. If there are competitors, do research with them or try to identify the pain points that they've identified and tackled. Let me know, Artem, if I've understood your question correctly. I'm more than happy to answer if I haven't. In the meanwhile, if anybody else has questions, feel free to put it on the chat. That's correct. I mean, interviews could just be one aspect. The other aspect could be, I don't know, for example, you could also do prototypes. So a lot of assuming it's a digital product, assuming it's an app-like product, web or mobile, you could use prototypes and then do heat maps, or just do screen recording. There are some third-party SaaS tools that allow you to record all of the clicks and how the user is browsing. You could record that. I'm not sure if that can be plugged into, like if that can be plugged into an independent AI tool. But what I know is a lot of the heat map tools now have started building their own sort of AI co-pilots, which are helping you identify that most people spend most time on FAQs, and it seems like they don't have all the information. So, they're trying to build hypotheses like that as well. Any other questions or thoughts? Anybody else using AI differently for discovery or prioritize not prioritization of roadmap, but even prioritization of tasks or what you focus on, or using AI tools to think about long-term strategy or long-term narratives? Okay, if not, oh, there's a new question. Let me go through this. Yeah, I think this is a really good question. So just to read out the question loudly, um, does building AI pipelines or AI processes, does it lie with every single PM or within the product management function of the org? So I think I will share two aspects to this answer. One is more theoretical, and one is this. The second one I think is a more practical or real world. Theoretically, it should happen at some zoomed up level. So it shouldn't happen at an individual PM or an individual team level. Because what will happen in that case is, yes, you will still have some leverage in the sense of, if you as a PM are reading or trying to identify customer pain points through thousands of row items, you'll um, make that work more seamless and efficient. But you will still miss out a lot of context on the learnings from other teams or other people, etc. And in my mind, usually when you're working in an organization, everybody is rolling up to the same org level goal. So it just makes sense to sort of unlock those synergies. With that said, what is happening on a practical level is, more often than not, in my experience, the conversation starts very, very siloed and it starts bottom up. So what that means is maybe one specific product manager, has tried this new tool and they are really liking it for their own use case, and they would then start sharing it with other teams, and then other teams would start evaluating. And this kind of keeps happening across teams. So team A is using tool 1, 2, 3, team B is using tool 4, 5, 6, and they might discuss this in a common team meeting, and everybody goes like, hey, you know what, it feels like this is like the biggest eureka moment for us, we should all collaborate and build this for the organization. So a lot of teams are struggling to what they call as creating an AI-based strategy. Yeah, so I think to summarize, theoretically, it should happen, not necessarily top up, but it should happen at some mid-level through a team or a person who has a very broad scope of vision so that they can identify that let's just do this across these three groups of data teams because they have a lot of synergies. And it should not happen completely bottom up. But currently, we're at a stage where everybody just wants to do something ASAP. And hence, there is some confusion on what's the best strategy. Okay, if there are no more questions, should we wrap up the session?
Yeah, thank you, Sarah, for closing out today's session. That'll be all for our stream for today. Thank you for being with us today. Hope you learned a lot and hope everybody enjoys the rest of the day.
Thank you. See you.
Have a good one. Bye.